The warm afternoon light filters through lace curtains as Martha Collins wipes her weathered hands on her apron. She looks directly at the camera, her eyes reflecting decades of both love and heartache. They say a mother's love knows no bounds. For 35 years, I believed that with every fiber of my being. I scrubbed floors until my knuckles bled, worked double shifts when others were celebrating holidays, and saved every spare penny I had, all for my son, Daniel. But sometimes, the people we sacrifice everything for are the ones who see our worth the least. This is the story of how my son's birthday gift to me opened my eyes to a painful truth, and how I finally found the courage to stand up for myself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I was never supposed to be a mother. After a complicated surgery, in my 20s, doctors told me children weren't in my future. I made peace with that and poured myself into my career as a bookkeeper at Riverdale Community Hospital. Then one rainy Tuesday, everything changed. I was finishing my shift when I heard crying coming from the hospital chapel. A young woman sat clutching a baby, mascara streaking down her face. Her name was Patricia Lawson. Patty. She insisted through her tears. The baby, just 6 months old, was Daniel. "I can't do this," she whispered. "My boyfriend doesn't want a kid. Says it'll ruin everything." She looked at me with desperate eyes. "They said you might help, that you're good with everyone's problems." I didn't know who they were, but as I held that little boy in my arms, something shifted inside me. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and just like that, I became a mother at 42. The adoption wasn't planned. It wasn't even something I'd considered. But within a week, paperwork was signed, and Daniel became mine. Patty disappeared from Lakeside without a trace, leaving only a hastily scribbled note. "Give him what I can't." Those first years weren't easy. I moved from bookkeeping to custodial supervision. It paid better, with more flexible hours. I converted my tiny living room into a bedroom for Daniel, sleeping on a pull-out couch myself. Every milestone, his first steps across our worn carpet, his first day of school in a carefully ironed uniform, his high school graduation where he stood taller than me, I cherished them all. Daniel was bright, with a charming smile that could melt the sternest teacher's heart. While I never had much, I made sure he never felt the sting of poverty. I worked overtime to pay for soccer camps, saved for years to help with college tuition, and even took out a second mortgage when he wanted to study abroad in his junior year. "You deserve the world," I'd tell him, pressing extra lunch money into his palm. And I meant it. Every sacrifice seemed worthwhile when I saw him succeed. When Daniel brought home Vanessa during his final year of college, I was thrilled. She was beautiful and polished, with perfect hair and clothes that looked like they came straight from magazine pages. Her parents were university professors who lived in Oak Ridge Heights, the kind of neighborhood where I cleaned houses on weekends for extra cash. "Mom, this is the one," Daniel whispered when Vanessa stepped away to take a call. His eyes shone with the same excitement he'd had as a child on Christmas mornings. "I'm going to marry her." And he did, 2 years later. I emptied my retirement fund to help with their down payment on a condo in Harbor View, an upscale part of town where the sidewalks were always clean and cars gleamed in every driveway. It was worth it, I told myself, to see Daniel happy. For their first anniversary, I gave them a weekend getaway to Blue Mountain Retreat. For their second, I surprised them with new furniture for their living room. I always gave what I could, often, more than I should have. Last month was my 60th birthday. Daniel and Vanessa invited me to dinner at the Glass House, an expensive restaurant overlooking the bay where waiters wore white gloves and menus didn't list prices. I spent a week's wages on a new dress, had my hair styled for the first time in years, and even splurged on a manicure, my first ever. "You look different, Mom," Daniel said when I arrived, and something in his tone made me wonder if that was good or bad. Vanessa smiled tightly, her eyes flicking over my dress. So, unique. The evening was pleasant enough. They asked about my health, mentioned their plans to redecorate their master bedroom, and shared stories about their recent vacation to Bermuda. When dessert arrived, a tiny chocolate cake with a single candle, Daniel slid a box across the table. "Happy birthday, Mom." The package was wrapped in simple brown paper, unlike the glossy silver package beside Vanessa's plate. "A gift from Daniel," she explained, "just because." I carefully unwrapped my present, smoothing the paper to save for later use, a habit from years of stretching every dollar. Inside was a set of cleaning supplies, rubber gloves, specialized brushes, and bottles of premium cleaner. "For your kitchen," Daniel explained. "I know how proud you are of keeping everything spotless." Vanessa reached over to touch her gift box. "Daniel always knows exactly what everyone needs," she said, opening her package to reveal a sparkling tennis bracelet that caught the light from every angle. "White gold with diamonds," Daniel added proudly. "Only the best for my beautiful wife." I nodded, forcing a smile as I looked down at my rubber gloves and scrub brushes. "Thank you, dear. Very practical." Later that night, as I placed the cleaning supplies under my sink beside nearly identical items I'd purchased myself, I caught my reflection in the small kitchen window. The woman staring back seemed suddenly older, her eyes tired in ways that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge a truth I'd been avoiding. My son, the boy I'd raised with every ounce of love in my heart, saw me as the help. Not as a mother who deserved the same thoughtfulness he showed his wife, but as someone whose identity was tied to cleaning. The next morning, I called Ellie, to friends, the one person who had stood by me through everything. We'd met years ago when we both worked night shifts at the hospital, she as a nurse's aide and I in custodial. Despite moving on to manage a small medical office, she never forgot our friendship. "Martha, honey, you know what this means, don't you?" she said after I described the birthday dinner. "It's time to start living for yourself." "But he's my son," I protested weakly. "And you're a human being," she countered, "with dreams you've put aside for too long." That afternoon, I found myself doing something I'd never done before. I called in sick to work. Instead of scrubbing floors at the hospital, I sat in my tiny backyard garden, watching butterflies dance among the flowers I'd planted but rarely had time to enjoy. What would life look like if I put myself first? The question felt almost blasphemous after decades of motherhood, but once it took root, it wouldn't let go. 3 days later, fate handed me an answer in the cruelest way. I was cleaning the executive wing of the hospital when I heard Daniel's voice from the half-open door of Dr. Thomas Lambert's office. They had been friends since college, with Thomas often joining our modest holiday dinners before his own success took him to more sophisticated tables. "I don't know what to do about Mom," Daniel was saying, voice tight with frustration. "Vanessa thinks we should be setting aside money for a retirement home, but have you seen those places for people without real savings? They're depressing." Dr. Lambert's response was measured. "Your mother has worked hard her whole life, Dan. She deserves dignity in her later years." I know, but Vanessa and I have the house renovations and we're planning for kids. Soon. We can't divert funds for a premium facility. I froze, mop in hand, heart thundering in my chest. "What about that condo she helped you buy?" Thomas asked. "Wasn't that basically her retirement fund?" Daniel laughed, a sound I once loved but now felt like a slap. "She insisted. What was I supposed to do, refuse? Besides, Harbor View is where we need to be for my career connections. Mom understands sacrifices." "And that birthday gift? Cleaning supplies, Dan? Really?" There was a pause before Daniel replied, his voice dropping. It's what she does, Tom. She cleans. What else would she want? It's not like she'd know what to do with jewelry or perfume. Vanessa says giving people gifts that align with their identity is more authentic. The mop slipped from my fingers, clattering against the polished floor. What was that? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Daniel's voice sharpened. I should have moved, should have walked away, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot as the door swung fully open. Daniel's expression shifted from surprise to embarrassment to something harder. Mom, were you eavesdropping? 60 years of putting others first, of swallowing hurt and disappointment, of making excuses for thoughtlessness. All of it crystallized in that moment into something new. Clarity. No, Daniel, I said quietly. I was working. It's what I do, after all. I clean. I picked up my mop and walked away, his calls fading behind me. For the first time in my life, I didn't turn back when my son called my name. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table with Ellie, a cup of tea growing cold between my hands. I don't know who I am without him, I confessed. I've been Daniel's mother for so long, I've forgotten how to be Martha. Ellie reached across the table, her hand covering mine. Then it's time to remember. She pulled out a brochure for a small storefront available for lease in downtown Lakeside. Remember how you used to talk about opening a little cafe before Daniel came along? I did remember. It had been a dream once, a cozy place with mismatched chairs and bookshelves along the walls, where people could linger over coffee and homemade pastries. A dream I'd folded away so completely I'd almost forgotten it had existed. I'm 60 years old, Ellie. It's too late. Says who? She pushed the brochure closer. The Martha I know has never been afraid of hard work. And this Martha deserves a chance at her dreams. As we talked into the night, something long dormant began to awaken in me. Not just anger at Daniel's dismissal or hurt at being undervalued, but a flicker of possibility, of a life reclaimed. I didn't know then that Daniel's birthday gift of cleaning supplies wouldn't be the last shock awaiting me, or that the path to finding myself would lead through one final, stunning confrontation. But for the first time in decades, I fell asleep, thinking about my own future instead of my son's. The awakening had begun. The morning after overhearing Daniel's conversation with Dr. Lambert, I woke with a strange sense of lightness. The hurt was still there, a dull ache behind my ribs, but something else had emerged alongside it. Determination. I called the hospital and requested a personal day, something I'd done only 3 times in 20 years. Then I did something even more unusual. I drove to Harborview, to the sleek community bank where Daniel kept his accounts. The same bank where 15 years earlier I'd opened a college fund for him, depositing every spare dollar until it grew enough to cover his education. I'd like to review all joint accounts I share with my son, I told the young woman behind the desk. Her name tag read Jessica, and she couldn't have been much older than Daniel was when he left for college. She tapped at her keyboard. It looks like you're co-signed on a savings account established in 2010. Her polite smile faltered slightly. Though it appears you haven't made any transactions yourself. That's correct, I said. I'd like to see all activity on that account for the past year, please. As Jessica printed the statements, I thought about the account's purpose. Daniel had suggested opening it when I turned 50. For emergencies, Mom, he'd said. Each month, I'd dutifully transferred $200 from my meager paycheck, imagining it as a safety net for my later years. The statements told a different story. Regular withdrawals, none made by me. $500 for home decor, $750 for anniversary dinner, $200 for V's birthday gift, likely the tennis bracelet that sparkled on Vanessa's wrist while I unwrapped. Rubber gloves. Is everything all right, Mrs. Collins? Jessica asked, noting my expression. Yes, I said quietly. Everything is finally becoming clear. I closed the account that day, transferring the remaining $12,467 to a new account under my name only. It wasn't enough for retirement, not nearly, but it was a start. My start. When my phone rang that evening, Daniel's name flashing on the screen, I let it go to voicemail. He called 3 more times before texting. Mom, the bank called about some account changes. There must be a mistake. Call me ASAP. I placed the phone face down on the table and went to bed early. The next morning, I woke to insistent knocking. Through the peephole, I saw Daniel on my doorstep, his normally perfect hair uncombed, his expression tight with irritation. Mom, I know you're in there. We need to talk about the account. I opened the door, suddenly aware of my faded robe and slippers of the small duplex I'd called home for 20 years, while helping my son afford much better. Good morning, Daniel. He stepped past me without waiting for an invitation. What's going on? The bank says you emptied our emergency account. Not emptied, I corrected. Transferred. To my own account. His eyes widened. You can't do that. We had an agreement. Did we? What exactly was that money for, Daniel? He ran a hand through his hair, exasperation evident. For emergencies, for your future. You know that. Interesting, I said, moving to the kitchen to start coffee. Because the statements show you've been using it for home decor, dinners, and gifts for Vanessa. Daniel followed me, his voice taking on the patient tone one might use with a confused child. Mom, that money was meant to be flexible. Yes, primarily for your future, but also for family needs when they arise. Family needs like diamond? Bracelets? His cheeks flushed. That's not fair. Vanessa works hard maintaining our social connections. Those relationships benefit all of us. I poured water into the coffee maker, keeping my hands busy to steady them. How exactly does Vanessa's tennis bracelet benefit me? You're being ridiculous, Daniel snapped. This isn't about one gift. It's about you making financial decisions without consulting me. I'm trying to secure our future, all of us. I turned to face him fully. No, Daniel. You're securing your future and Vanessa's. I was just the convenient ATM. Something shifted in his expression then, a calculation forming behind his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice had softened. Mom, I know you're upset about your birthday gift. I should have been more thoughtful. Why don't you come over for dinner tonight? Vanessa's making that pasta you like. We can sort this all out. For a moment, I felt the familiar pull. The desire to smooth things over, to be the understanding mother who never made waves. But Ellie's words echoed in my mind. It's time to start living for yourself. I can't tonight, I said. I have an appointment to look at a commercial property. Daniel's brow furrowed. A what? What for? A cafe, I said, surprising myself with how right the words felt. I'm thinking of opening a small cafe downtown. He laughed, a short, dismissive sound that cut deeper than any argument could have. A cafe? Mom, be serious. You've never run a business. You don't have the experience or the startup capital. Besides, who would hire a 60-year-old with no relevant background? I'm not looking to be hired, I said. I'm looking to hire. And as for experience, I've managed the hospital's entire custodial staff for 15 years, balancing budgets, scheduling employees, and handling customer satisfaction. I've also been catering staff gatherings with my baking since before you were born. Daniel's expression shifted from amusement to concern. This is about the cleaning supplies, isn't it? You're having some kind of midlife crisis because I gave you a practical gift instead of something frivolous. I'm 60, Daniel. That's past midlife unless I plan to live to 1 to 20. I poured coffee into my favorite mug, a chipped one with faded sunflowers that Daniel had made in 5th grade art class. And no, this isn't about the gift. It's about realizing that I've spent 35 years putting your dreams first. Now it's time for mine. With what money? He demanded. That account was supposed to be for your retirement, not some foolish vanity project. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the little boy who had once held my hand crossing every street, but a man who had grown comfortable with taking my money, my time, my sacrifices, all while calculating exactly how little he needed to give in return. My money, Daniel, my choice. He left angry, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the family photos on my wall, photos where his smile grew increasingly practiced as he aged, while mine grew increasingly tired. I should have been devastated. Instead, I felt strangely liberated as I sipped my coffee and prepared for my appointment with the realtor. The storefront Ellie had found was perfect, a narrow building with large windows, nestled between a bookshop and a vintage clothing store on Lakeside's revitalized Main Street. The previous tenant, a home goods boutique, had left behind beautiful wood shelving and a long counter that could easily be converted for cafe use. It needs work, the realtor, Ms. Patel, warned as she showed me the small kitchen area in back. But the bones are good. As we discussed lease terms, my phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Daniel, each one more urgent than the last. Mom, we need to talk about this. You're not thinking clearly. Vanessa and I are worried about you. I silenced the phone and signed the intent to lease, putting down a deposit that represented 2 months of careful saving. That evening, as I sat at my kitchen table making lists of equipment I would need and suppliers to contact, there was another knock at my door. This time, it was Vanessa who stood on my doorstep, her perfect posture and immaculate appearance making my simple home seem even shabbier by comparison. "Martha," she said, stepping inside with the careful movements of someone afraid to touch anything. "We need to talk." I gestured to the living room with its worn furniture and crocheted throws. "Please, sit down." She perched on the edge of my sofa, smoothing her cream-colored skirt. "Daniel is very upset. I'm aware. He's worried about you. We both are." She leaned forward, her voice softening to the tone one might use with an elderly relative showing signs of confusion. "This cafe idea, it's not practical. The failure rate for new restaurants is over 60% in the first year, and you have no experience." I noticed how she echoed Daniel's dismissal, likely having rehearsed this conversation together. "Thank you for your concern, but I've made my decision." "Martha," she sighed, "we understand you're feeling underappreciated. Daniel told me about your reaction to your birthday gift." "Did he?" "He meant well," she continued. "He knows how much you value cleanliness and thought you'd appreciate something aligned with your interests. While you value jewelry," I observed, "aligned with your interests." A flash of irritation crossed her features before she composed herself. "That's not fair. Daniel and I have different love languages, that's all." "And what would you say my love language is, Vanessa?" She blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "Well, service, obviously. You show love by doing things for people. Cleaning, cooking, taking care of practical matters." "And how would you say Daniel shows love to me?" Another blink. "He includes you in our lives, invites you to dinners, checks on you, and accesses my savings for your jewelry," I added quietly. Her cheeks flushed. "That account was for family emergencies." Was my tennis bracelet an emergency? The direct question clearly flustered her. "That's between Daniel and me. The point is, this cafe idea is impulsive and risky. We have a better solution." Here it was, the real purpose of her visit. "We think you should move in with us," she said, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. "The condo has that small third bedroom we use as a home office. It could easily convert to a bedroom for you. You could help around the house, maybe with childcare, down the road when we start our family. It would be perfect." Perfect for whom, I wondered. They would gain free housekeeping and childcare while appearing the devoted children taking in an aging mother. Meanwhile, I would lose my independence entirely, becoming an unpaid servant in exchange for a converted office space. That's a generous offer, I said carefully. But I'll be quite busy with the cafe. Vanessa's mask of concern slipped slightly. Martha, be reasonable. You can't afford to open a cafe. That money needs to last your retirement. You seem very concerned about my finances. Of course we are, your family, and families look out for each other. She reached for my hand, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. Daniel mentioned you've been working extra shifts at the hospital lately. At your age, that can't be good for your health. Moving in with us would give you a chance to relax. Like your parents? I asked mildly. The university professors? Do they take it easy now? She withdrew her hand. That's different. They have pensions, academic credentials, options. And there it was. The unveiled truth. In their eyes, I was without value, without options. A charity case to be managed, not a person with dreams of her own. Thank you for your offer, I said, standing to indicate our conversation was ending. But I'll be staying here and opening my cafe. Vanessa stood as well, frustration evident in the tight line of her mouth. Daniel was right. You're being irrational. That money was meant to secure your future, not be wasted on some pipe dream. My future, I emphasized. My choice. After she left, I sat in the sudden quiet of my home, thinking about choices. Those made for love and those made from obligation, those made consciously and those we slide into without realizing. For 35 years, my choices had revolved around Daniel. Even my career path, moving from bookkeeping to custodial work for the better pay and flexible hours, had been chosen with his needs in mind. What would I have done differently if I'd chosen for myself? The question was both painful and exhilarating. My phone rang again, Daniel's name flashing on the screen. This time, I answered. Mom, what did you say to Vanessa? She's upset. I declined your offer to move in, I said simply. We're trying to help you, he said, exasperation clear in his voice. This cafe idea is crazy. Where would you even get the skills to run a business? I raised you by myself while working full-time and managing a department. I think I can handle a small cafe. His sigh was heavy with disappointment. You're not being realistic. Look, why don't you come to dinner on Sunday? Patricia and Richard will be there. Maybe seeing all of us together will help you understand what's important. My hand tightened on the phone. Patricia and Richard? Yes, Daniel said, a note of pride entering his voice. You remember Patty, my birth mother? I finally found her last year through one of those DNA services. She and her husband Richard have been amazing. They're actually the ones who suggested, you might like to move in with us to keep the family close. The room seemed to tilt slightly. You found Patricia? Last year? And you didn't tell me? A pause, then. I was waiting for the right time. She was nervous about meeting you after everything. But now that you're going through this phase, we thought it might help to have a family dinner. Show you what really matters. What really mattered? As if my dreams, my sacrifices, my entire life raising him weren't what really mattered. Sunday, I said, my voice calmer than I felt. What time? 6 o'clock. And Mom, try to dress nicely. The hesitation in his voice made his meaning clear. Don't embarrass us. After hanging up, I sat motionless on my couch, absorbing this new betrayal. Daniel had found his birth mother, the woman who had abandoned him in a hospital chapel, and had been building a relationship with her for a year without telling me. Now he was using her as leverage to dissuade me from pursuing my own dreams. The pain was sharp, but clarifying. This was no longer about a thoughtless birthday gift. This was about recognizing a pattern that had persisted for years. Daniel took what he needed from me: money, time, care, while giving back as little as possible. That night, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I pulled out an old photo album from the bottom drawer of my dresser, pictures from before Daniel came into my life. There I was at 25, standing proudly in front of the small bakery, where I'd worked as assistant manager, dreams of my own shop already forming. There with friends at 30, celebrating my promotion to head bookkeeper at the hospital, financially stable and respected for my skills. There at 40, just months before Daniel, laughing with Ellie at a staff party, wearing a dress I'd sewn myself and serving cupcakes everyone raved about. I traced my younger face with a fingertip, seeing the confidence and hope in my eyes, the belief that I was building toward something that mattered. When had I stopped believing that my own dreams mattered? The next morning, I called Ellie. "I need your help," I said simply. "Name it," she replied without hesitation. "Sunday dinner at Daniel's. I need you as my +1. "Count me in," she said. "Should I bring my famous bourbon pecan pie? The one that makes people tell the truth whether they mean to or not?" I laughed for what felt like the first time in days. Perfect. Over the next few days, I threw myself into preparations for both the cafe and the upcoming dinner. I met with a small business advisor at the community college who reviewed my business plan and offered valuable suggestions. I secured a modest, small business loan based on my excellent credit history and the detailed projections I'd prepared. I even hired my first employee, a single mother named Rachel who had previously worked at the hospital cafeteria and knew her way around commercial kitchens. Each step I took built my confidence, reminding me of capabilities I'd always had but had set aside to focus on Daniel. When Sunday arrived, I looked at myself in the mirror with new eyes. I'd had my hair styled, not in the conservative bob I'd worn for years, but in a modern, flattering cut that framed my face. I'd purchased a new dress, not expensive but well-fitted, and in a deep teal that brought out the green in my eyes. "You look like yourself," Ellie said when she picked me up. "The self you lost sight of somewhere along the way." Daniel's condo was in an upscale building with a doorman who eyed Ellie's old sedan with barely disguised disdain as we pulled up. The unit itself was impressive: high ceilings, hardwood floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. I remembered the day I'd written the check for the down payment, how proud I'd felt helping my son secure such a beautiful home. Now, I noticed different details: the plush sofa where I'd never been invited to stay overnight, even when I'd worked; late cleaning shifts; the gleaming kitchen where Vanessa rarely cooked but insisted on top-of-the-line appliances; the spare bedroom converted to a home office rather than kept available for visits. "Mom," Daniel said as he opened the door, surprise evident in his voice. "You look different." "Thank you," I said, stepping inside with Ellie. "You remember Eleanor Rodriguez? My oldest friend." Daniel's welcoming smile faltered slightly. "I didn't realize you were bringing a guest." "I mentioned I was coming for dinner. You didn't say I couldn't bring a friend." From the dining area, a woman's voice called out, "Daniel, is that your mother?" She appeared in the doorway. Patricia Lawson, now Patricia Hargrove. She was about my age but looked years younger, with expertly colored hair and the kind of subtle cosmetic work that speaks of regular maintenance appointments. Her clothing was expensive but understated, the kind of casual elegance that requires significant income to achieve. Beside her stood a tall, distinguished-looking man with silver hair and a confident bearing. Richard Hargrove, I presumed. From his tailored clothing and the ease with which he occupied space, it was clear he was a man accustomed to wealth and influence. "Martha," Patricia said, stepping forward with her arms outstretched as if we were old friends. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you. Daniel has told us so much about you." I accepted her brief embrace, noting how she skillfully maintained enough distance to avoid real contact. Has he? How interesting, since he never mentioned finding you until yesterday. An awkward silence fell, broken by Vanessa emerging from the kitchen. Dinner's almost ready, she announced, her gaze sweeping critically over my appearance before settling on Ellie with undisguised surprise. Oh, we weren't expecting additional guests. I can set another place, I offered, moving toward the kitchen with the ease of someone who had done so many times before. No need, Vanessa said quickly. I've got it under control. We moved to the dining room where the table was elegantly set with china I recognized. A wedding gift from me, purchased on a payment plan that had taken 18 months to complete. Crystal wine glasses caught the light from the chandelier above, and fresh flowers formed a centerpiece that probably cost more than I earned in a day. As we took our seats, Daniel at the head of the table, with Vanessa and the Hargroves on either side of him, Ellie and I relegated to the far end, I observed the dynamics at play. Daniel spoke animatedly, directing most of his comments to Richard, whose approval he clearly sought. Patricia complimented Vanessa on everything from the table setting to her jewelry, their shared interest in appearances creating an immediate bond. Ellie and I exchanged glances, communicating volumes without words. This dinner wasn't about helping me understand what's important. It was about showing me that I didn't belong in their new family configuration. So, Martha, Patricia said during a lull in conversation, Daniel tells us you're considering some changes. Opening a cafe, was it? Her tone made the word cafe sound like an exotic, slightly ridiculous concept. Not considering, I corrected. Doing. I've signed a lease on Main Street and secured financing. We open in 6 weeks. Richard raised his eyebrows. That's ambitious for someone your age, starting a new venture from scratch. Mom, Daniel interjected. Richard has extensive business experience. He's on the board of several companies. Maybe you should listen to his advice before moving forward. I took a sip of water, choosing my words carefully. I appreciate the concern, but my business plan has already been reviewed by professionals at the Small Business Development Center. They were quite encouraging. Still, Richard insisted, his tone patronizing, the restaurant industry is notoriously difficult. The startup costs alone can be crippling. It's not a restaurant, I clarified. It's a cafe focusing on coffee, tea, and baked goods. Lower overhead, higher margins. Martha, Patricia said, leaning forward with manufactured concern. We're only thinking of your security. At your age, risking your savings on a new business seems unwise. Vanessa nodded emphatically. Exactly what we've been saying. That's why we think moving in with us makes so much more sense. You'd have companionship, security, and could help us in practical ways. Like cleaning. Ellie spoke for the first time, her voice pleasant but pointed. Since Martha's so good at it. Good enough to warrant specialized cleaning supplies as a birthday gift while others receive diamonds. Daniel flushed. That's not. Not what? I interrupted quietly. Not what you meant when you told Dr. Lambert that cleaning is what I do? So cleaning supplies were an appropriate gift? That I wouldn't know what to do with jewelry or perfume? The table fell silent. Daniel stared at me, realization dawning in his eyes. You heard that conversation? You were eavesdropping on a private discussion? I was working, I corrected. In the executive wing, where I clean. It's what I do, remember? Vanessa shot Daniel a warning look before turning to me with a placating smile. Martha, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We value everything you do for this family. The gift was meant to be practical, that's all. Like the tennis bracelet? Ellie asked innocently. Very practical for all that tennis Vanessa plays. Patricia cleared her throat. I think we're getting off track. The point is, Martha, that we're concerned about you making hasty decisions. That could affect your financial security. Daniel has always had your best interests at heart. Has he? I placed my napkin on the table. Like when he accessed our joint savings account, the one meant for my retirement, to buy luxury items? Or when he suggested I move in here to provide free housekeeping and childcare while living in a converted office. Richard's expression changed, a businessman recognizing a negotiation he wasn't controlling. Perhaps we should all take a step back. Martha, no one is suggesting you don't deserve to pursue your interests. But at your age, security should be the priority. My age, I repeated. You know, it's interesting how often that comes up. At my age, I shouldn't take risks. At my age, I should accept less. At my age, I should be grateful for cleaning supplies while watching others receive diamonds. I looked directly at Daniel. What if, at my age, I've finally realized that I've spent decades putting everyone else first? What if, at my age, I've decided it's finally my turn? Daniel's frustration visibly mounted. Mom, you're being dramatic. We're trying to help you. You've always said family comes first. Family, I agreed. But it seems we have different definitions of what that means. To me, it meant sacrificing my dreams so you could have yours. To you, it means I should continue sacrificing while you build a life that has increasingly little room for me, except as household help. Patricia reached across the table, her manicured hand stopping short of actually touching mine. Martha, dear, no one is diminishing your contributions. You've done an admirable job raising Daniel alone. Now it's time to let us help take care of you. The way you took care of Daniel? The words slipped out before I could stop them, sharper than I intended. Her face hardened momentarily before she regained her composure. That was a difficult time for me. I made the best decision I could for everyone involved. So am I said quietly. Making the best decision for everyone involved, including myself. Tension hung in the air as Vanessa served dessert, an elaborate tiramisu that she proudly announced she'd purchased from an exclusive bakery downtown. Ellie caught my eye, and I nodded slightly. She disappeared briefly to the kitchen, returning with her bourbon pecan pie. Since we're celebrating new beginnings, she announced, placing its center table, I thought we might want options. The remainder of the dinner passed in strained conversation, punctuated by pointed questions from Richard about my business plan, thinly veiled criticism from Patricia about my appearance, and increasingly desperate attempts from Daniel to control the narrative. Through it all, I maintained a calm I didn't entirely feel, answering questions directly and without apology. As Ellie and I prepared to leave, Daniel followed us to the door while the others remained in the living room, voices lowered in private conversation. Mom, he said, his voice softening to the tone he'd always used when asking for something. Please reconsider this cafe idea. We're worried about you. Are you worried about me, Daniel? Or about the money you thought would eventually be yours? He looked stung. That's not fair. I've always cared about your well-being. Enough to give me cleaning supplies for my birthday while buying diamonds for Vanessa? Enough to suggest, I live in your home office while providing free labor? Enough to hide your relationship with Patricia for a year because... Why? You were ashamed of me? I wasn't ashamed, he protested, though his eyes slid away from mine. I was protecting. You? I didn't want you to feel replaced. But I have been replaced, haven't I? Patricia gives you the social standing you want. She fits with the image you're trying to project. She's not an embarrassment like your janitor mother. I never said... You didn't have to say it. I interrupted gently. You showed it in 1,000 ways. And that's okay, Daniel. It's taught me something important. It's time for me to stop measuring my worth by your approval. I reached for the door handle, pausing to look back at him. My son, my life's work. My greatest love and deepest disappointment. I'll always love you, Daniel. But I don't like the man you've become very much. And I like the woman I've been even less. It's time for both of us to change. As Ellie drove me home, the weight of 35 years of unquestioned sacrifice began to lift. In its place grew something tentative but powerful, the possibility of a life reclaimed. I didn't know then what challenges awaited me in the weeks to come, how Daniel and the Hargroves would escalate their efforts to protect me from myself, or how their interference would force me to make choices I never imagined necessary. What I did know was that for the first time in decades, I was choosing my own path forward, not as Daniel's mother, but as Martha Collins, a woman with dreams of her own. The morning after the disastrous dinner at Daniel's condo, I woke early with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. My conversation with Daniel had left me raw but resolute. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, it would be mine. I was sipping coffee at my kitchen table, reviewing renovation plans for the cafe when my phone began to ring. Patricia Lawson Hargrove's name flashed on the screen, a contact I hadn't added myself. Daniel must have programmed it during one of his visits, preparing for this new family configuration without bothering to consult me. My finger hovered over the decline button, but curiosity won out. "Hello, Patricia." "Martha," she said, her voice warm with practiced charm. "I hope I'm not calling too early. I wanted to check in after last night." Things ended on such a tense note. I took another sip of coffee, allowing the silence to stretch. Patricia was used to people rushing to fill uncomfortable pauses, a tactic I'd observed in those accustomed to social power. "I appreciate your concern," I finally said, "but I'm quite busy this morning." "Of course," she continued smoothly. "I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to clear the air. Last night wasn't at all what Richard and I intended. We genuinely want what's best for Daniel, and for you." "What exactly do you think is best for me, Patricia?" A delicate pause. "Well, security, of course. Comfort in your later years. The peace of mind that comes from knowing you're taken care of." "Taken care of?" I repeated, like a child or an invalid. "That's not... I've been taking care of myself and Daniel for 35 years, I interrupted. "I think I can manage without your guidance." Her voice cooled slightly. "Martha, we're only trying to help. Daniel is concerned about this cafe venture, the financial risk." "My finances are no longer Daniel's concern," I said firmly. "Or yours." "We're family," she insisted. "Daniel is our shared connection. We should be working together, not at odds." "Family," I echoed, tasting the bitterness of the word. "Tell me, Patricia, when did you decide Daniel was family again? When he found you through that DNA service? Or when you realized he had access to my savings?" Her sharp intake of breath told me I'd hit a nerve. "That's uncalled for." "Is it? Because from where I stand, you seem quite interested in how I spend my money. Money you never contributed when Daniel needed braces, or college tuition, or help with his condo down payment." "The past is the past," she said, voice tight with controlled anger. "I made my choices, as you made yours." "Yes," I agreed. "And now I'm making a new choice, to build something for myself after a lifetime of giving to others." "At 60? With no business experience? Be realistic, Martha. The statistics for new business success..." "Thank you for your concern," I cut in. "But my decision is made. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with my contractor in 30 minutes. After hanging up, I sat with my cooling coffee, processing the conversation. Patricia's call wasn't about reconciliation, it was reconnaissance. She and the others were strategizing, trying to find the right pressure points to make me fall back in line. The realization should have hurt, but instead, it strengthened my resolve. My contractor, Jay, was a gruff man in his 50s who had done small repairs around my duplex for years. He'd seemed surprised when I approached him about renovating the cafe space, but quickly warmed to the project, offering practical suggestions that improved my initial plans while keeping costs manageable. "Looking good, Martha," he said as we walked through the storefront that morning. "We can have the counter extended here, add some outlets for the espresso machines along this wall, and build out the display cases for your baking. 6 weeks is tight, but we can make it happen if permits come through on schedule." As we finalized details, my phone buzzed with texts from Daniel. "Mom, what did you say to Patricia? She's upset. Why are you making this so difficult?" "We're trying to help you." I silenced the phone again, focusing instead on the space before me. In my mind's eye, I could already see it. Warm lighting, the aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods, mismatched chairs and tables where people could linger, bookshelves along the back wall filled with volumes to borrow or exchange. The second, Chance Cafe, a name that felt increasingly meaningful. That afternoon, I had an appointment at Lakeside Community Bank to finalize my small business loan. The loan officer, Mr. Chen, had been supportive throughout the process, impressed by my detailed business plan and the market research I'd conducted. "Everything looks in order, Mrs. Collins," he said, sliding the paperwork across his desk. "Your credit score is excellent, and your projections are realistic. The board has approved your application." As I reached for the pen, the door to Mr. Chen's office opened without a knock. Richard Hargrove strode in, followed by a flustered secretary, apologizing for the interruption. "Ah, Martinez," Richard said to Mr. Chen, ignoring me completely. "I hoped to catch you before this meeting progressed too far." Mr. Chen stood, clearly confused. "Mr. Hargrove, I wasn't expecting you, and it's Chen, not Martinez." Richard waved dismissively. "Yes, of course. Chen. My apologies." He finally acknowledged me with a tight smile. "Mrs. Collins, I hope we're not too late to prevent a regrettable situation." "Mr. Hargrove," Mr. Chen said, his professional demeanor regained. "I'm in the middle of a confidential client meeting. Perhaps we could speak later?" Richard produced a business card, placing it deliberately on the desk. "I'm on the Regional Advisory Board for United Financial Group. We own a controlling interest in your bank, as I'm sure you're aware." Mr. Chen's expression shifted subtly as he read the card. "I see. However, Mr. Hargrove, this loan application has already been approved by our committee. The paperwork is ready for signing." "Yes, well," Richard continued smoothly, "new information has come to light regarding Mrs. Collins's application that warrants reconsideration." I found my voice through the shock. "What information?" Richard didn't look at me as he answered. "Concerns about capacity and financial stability. Mrs. Collins is of advanced age, with no business experience, and may not be making decisions with full cognitive clarity." The blood rushed to my face. "Excuse me?" "Mrs. Collins." Richard finally turned to me, his expression a mask of concern. "Daniel has shared with us his worries about your recent behavior. Emptying joint accounts, making impulsive financial decisions, rejecting family support. These can be signs of cognitive decline in seniors. We're simply suggesting a more thorough evaluation before the bank commits to a loan that could deplete your retirement security." The calculated cruelty of it stole my breath. They were questioning my mental competence, a tactic designed not just to stop the loan but to undermine my autonomy entirely. Mr. Chen looked uncomfortable, glancing between us. "Mr. Hargrove, while I appreciate your position, we have a process for loan approval that has been followed correctly in this case. Mrs. Collins has provided all necessary documentation and meets our criteria." "I understand," Richard said, his cocky tone making it clear he didn't expect resistance. "But given the circumstances, I'm requesting a review by the executive committee. I believe they'll want to exercise extra caution." A week ago, I might have crumbled under this assault, retreated, apologized, surrendered my dreams to keep peace. But that Martha was gone, replaced by a woman who recognized manipulation for what it was. "Mr. Chen," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'd like to sign the loan documents now as scheduled." Chen hesitated, visibly torn between fear of Hargrove's influence and adherence to procedure. Richard's smile tightened. "I strongly advise against proceeding until the executive review is complete. The bank could face liability if it appears they took advantage of a vulnerable senior." That was when I opened my purse and removed a small digital recorder, placing it carefully on the desk between us. "Mr. Hargrove," I said quietly, "would you mind repeating your concerns about my cognitive capacity? I want to make sure I have your exact wording for my attorney." His expression shifted from confidence to wariness. "You're recording this conversation?" "I've found it helpful to keep accurate records lately," I replied, "especially when discussing my mental competence." I turned to Mr. Chen. "I believe attempting to block a loan approval based on unsubstantiated claims about a client's mental capacity without medical evidence could constitute discrimination based on age, which is illegal under federal banking regulations. My attorney would certainly find it interesting." Richard's face hardened. "You don't want to make an enemy of me, Martha." "No," I agreed. "I don't want enemies at all. I simply want to proceed with my business without interference. Now, Mr. Chen, shall we continue with the signing?" After a tense moment, Chen pushed the paperwork toward me. I signed my name with a flourish, each stroke a declaration of independence. Richard left without another word, but the victory felt hollow. The level of coordination between him, Patricia, and Daniel signaled an escalation I hadn't anticipated. They weren't simply trying to dissuade me from opening the cafe. They were attempting to take control of my finances, my decisions, my life. That evening, Ellie arrived at my door with a bottle of wine and sympathetic eyes. "You look like you've been through the ringer," she observed, following me to the kitchen. "What happened?" As I recounted the confrontation at the bank, Ellie's expression darkened. "They're trying to declare you incompetent? That's a new low." "They're desperate," I said, pouring wine into mismatched glasses. Richard's intervention didn't work today, but I don't think they'll stop there. "What's your next move?" I sipped my wine thoughtfully. "I need to protect myself legally. If they're willing to question my competence to block a loan, what else might they try?" Ellie nodded solemnly. "My nephew's a lawyer. Estate planning. Elder law. He could help you lock things down tight." "Elder law," I repeated with a rueful smile. "I guess that's me now, an elder in need of legal protection from my own family." "From people who aren't acting like family," Ellie corrected. "There's a difference." The next morning, I met with Ellie's nephew, Michael Rodriguez, in his modest downtown office. He was younger than I expected, early 30s with kind, eyes behind stylish glasses, but his questions were thorough and his manner reassuringly professional. "Based on what you've described, Mrs. Collins, there are several steps we should take immediately," he said after listening to my situation. "First, a durable power of attorney designating someone you trust completely to make financial and medical decisions if you become incapacitated. That person cannot be Daniel, given the circumstances." "Ellie," I said without hesitation. "It should be Ellie." He nodded. "Good choice. Next, we'll update your will to specifically outline your intentions regarding your assets, including the cafe. We'll also prepare a letter from me documenting your current mental competence, with an evaluation from an independent physician, to support it." "They're really going to make me prove I'm of sound mind," I marveled, the absurdity of it momentarily overwhelming the hurt. "Unfortunately, it's a common tactic in family disputes involving older adults and assets," Michael explained. By taking these steps proactively, we established that you recognized potential challenges and addressed them while clearly competent. And my business? How do I protect it? We'll set up an LLC with clear operating agreements that give you full control but protect the business as an entity, separate from your personal assets. That way, even if there are future challenges to your competence, the cafe can continue operating according to your established directives. By the time I left Michael's office, I felt more secure, but also deeply sad. The legal protections necessary to defend myself against my own son's machinations were a stark reminder of how completely our relationship had fractured. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity as cafe renovations progressed and legal safeguards fell into place. Daniel continued his campaign through daily calls and texts, alternating between concern, guilt, and thinly veiled threats. Mom, we found a fantastic assisted living community you should consider. The doctor says stress can accelerate cognitive decline. This cafe will only hurt your health. If you won't think about yourself, think about what this does to our family. Maruscata responded rarely, and then only with brief, factual updates. I'm well. Renovations proceeding on schedule. No need for concern. As the cafe took shape, so did my new identity. I hired 3 part-time employees: Rachel, the single mother from the hospital cafeteria; Devin, a culinary student needing flexible hours around classes; and May, a retired teacher with a passion for baking. Together, we developed our menu, tested recipes, and created the warm, welcoming atmosphere I'd always envisioned. 2 weeks before our scheduled opening, I arrived at the cafe early to meet with our coffee supplier. The front door was unlocked, unusual, as Jay was typically punctual, but never early. Entering cautiously, I found not my contractor, but Daniel, standing in the center of the half-finished space with his arms crossed. "Daniel," I said, surprise momentarily overriding caution, "what are you doing here? How did you get in?" "Jay gave me access," he replied. We had an interesting conversation about permit delays and budget overruns. The implication hung in the air between us. Jay, whose construction company operated on thin margins, was vulnerable to pressure from someone with Richard Hargrove's connections. "Whatever you're trying to do," I said carefully, "it won't work. The permits are approved and my financing is secure." Daniel took a step closer, his expression a mixture of frustration and something that almost looked like concern. "Mom, this has gone far enough. You've made your point. You felt underappreciated, overlooked. I get it now." "Do you?" "Yes, and I'm sorry about the birthday gift. It was thoughtless. But this," he gestured around the cafe space, "this isn't the answer. You're risking everything on a business that statistically will fail within a year." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, "but it will be my choice, my risk, my failure if it comes to that." "And then what? When the money's gone? When you're left with nothing? Who do you think will have to pick up the pieces?" There it was, the real concern. Not my welfare, but the burden I might become if my venture failed. "I won't be your burden, Daniel. I've made arrangements." His eyes narrowed. "What arrangements?" "Legal ones, to protect myself and my business." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "You went to a lawyer? Against your own family?" "To protect my interests," I corrected, "which seem increasingly at odds with yours." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. "Mom, please, we can work this out. Come to dinner tonight, just you and me. No Vanessa, no Patricia and Richard, like old times." The invitation was tempting, a chance to reconnect, to find the son I'd known before status and appearance became his guiding values. But the timing was suspicious, coming immediately after his failed attempt to intimidate me through Jay. "I can't tonight," I said. "I have inventory to complete before our supplier meeting." It's always about the cafe now, he said bitterly. This place has become more important to you than your own son. No, Daniel. You became more important to yourself than our relationship long before the cafe existed. I just didn't let myself see it until recently. His expression hardened. I've tried to be patient, to understand this, midlife crisis or whatever it is, but you're forcing my hand. Richard knows people at the health department, at city licensing. There are a dozen ways to delay your opening indefinitely. The naked threat stunned me. You would actively sabotage my business? Your own mother's dream? I'm trying to protect you, he shouted, his composure finally cracking. From yourself? From financial ruin? From becoming a laughingstock when this fails? Do you think people will take a 60-year-old former janitor's cafe seriously? Do you think anyone will come? Each word landed like a physical blow, revealing the depth of his disdain. In that moment, I finally saw clearly what I had been struggling to accept. The son I had sacrificed everything for viewed me with contempt. The revelation was devastating, but also freeing. I think, I said quietly, that you should leave now. Mom? Now, Daniel. Before either of us says something unforgivable. After he left, I sat alone in my half-finished cafe, surrounded by evidence of my new beginning, paint samples on the walls, the partially installed counter, chairs waiting to be arranged. For the first time since this journey began, I allowed myself to doubt. What if Daniel was right? What if this venture was doomed to fail? What if, at 60, I had missed my chance to become anything other than what I had been? The bell above the door jingled, pulling me from my thoughts. Ellie entered, followed by Rachel and Devon, all carrying bags of supplies for our test run the following day. Martha? Ellie called, concern evident when she saw me sitting alone in the dim light. What happened? As I recounted Daniel's visit and threats, their expressions shifted from shock to indignation to determination. He can try to stop us, Rachel said firmly, but he doesn't know who he's dealing with. My brother works for the city. I'll have him keep an eye on any complaints filed against this address. Devon nodded. And my roommate's in the health inspector's office. She can give us advance notice of any surprise inspections. My Sunday school group includes 3 of the most influential gossips in Lakeside, Ellie added with a mischievous smile. If Daniel and his fancy friends want to play dirty, they'll find their reputations discussed over every bridge table and book club in town. Their immediate support, practical, specific, determined, brought tears to my eyes. These, people who had known me for weeks or months, were more loyal than the son I had raised for decades. Thank you, I managed, my voice thick with emotion. All of you. Devon squeezed my shoulder. You gave me a chance when other places wouldn't work around my class schedule. Rachel's kid has health care for the first time because of the benefits. You figured out how to provide. We're not just employees, Martha. We're a team. That night, as I prepared for bed, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Wary after the day's confrontation, I almost didn't answer, but something prompted me to accept the call. Mrs. Collins? A woman's voice asked. This is Sydney Parker. We've never met, but I'm a nurse at Lakeside General. I work with Dr. Lambert. My guard immediately rose. How did you get this number? Dr. Lambert gave it to me. He suggested I call you privately, away from the hospital. She paused. It's about your son, Daniel, and some concerns we have about what he's been saying. What concerns? He's been telling people, board members specifically, that you're experiencing cognitive decline, that you've become erratic, paranoid, financially irresponsible. Dr. Lambert overheard him discussing the possibility of seeking guardianship. The room seemed to tilt. Guardianship? Yes, it would give him legal control over your finances and medical decisions. Dr. Lambert is worried. He knows it's not true, but Daniel can be very persuasive, and he seems to have influential support. Richard and Patricia Hargrove, I murmured. Yes, those names have been mentioned. Dr. Lambert wanted you to know so you could protect yourself. He couldn't call directly because of his friendship with Daniel, but he thinks what's happening is wrong. After thanking her and hanging up, I sat on the edge of my bed, hands trembling slightly. Guardianship, the ultimate control, the complete erasure of my autonomy. They weren't just trying to stop the cafe. They were trying to take over my life entirely. In that moment of clarity, I understood that the confrontation brewing wasn't just about a birthday gift of cleaning supplies or even about the cafe. It was about my fundamental right to self-determination after a lifetime of putting others first. The next morning, I called Michael Rodriguez and explained the new development. His response was immediate and reassuring. The medical evaluation we've already done will help counter any guardianship petition, but we need to be more aggressive now, he said. I'm going to file preemptive paperwork establishing your clear competence and opposing any future guardianship attempts. I'll also prepare a cease and desist letter regarding their interference with your business. Will that be enough? I asked. His hesitation told me more than his words. It's a start. But Mrs. Collins, Martha, you need to understand something. These legal battles can become prolonged and bitter. They drain resources, emotional and financial. Are you prepared for that? Was I? After a lifetime of avoiding conflict, of sacrificing my needs for harmony, was I ready to fight back with every resource at my disposal? The answer came with surprising certainty. Yes. For the first time, I was fighting not just for a cafe, but for my dignity, my autonomy, my right to define my own worth beyond the role of mother or housekeeper or silent supporter of others' dreams. I told Michael. Whatever it takes. That afternoon, as I sorted through old photo albums looking for pictures to hang in the cafe, I found a snapshot I'd forgotten. Daniel at 5 years old, helping me frost cupcakes in our tiny kitchen. His face was smeared with icing, his smile wide and genuine, his small hand trustingly in mine. Beside it was another photo, me at the same age I was now, younger Daniel proudly holding up a Mother's Day card he'd made, my arms around him, both of us laughing. Where had that mother and son gone? When had appreciation transformed into entitlement, love into obligation, respect into disdain? I carefully removed both photos from the album and placed them in an envelope, adding a brief note. Remember, when we were these people, I miss them. I addressed it to Daniel's office rather than his home, avoiding the likelihood of Vanessa intercepting it. It was an olive branch, small, fragile, perhaps futile, but it felt necessary before the coming storm. One last attempt to reach the son I had loved beyond reason, before we became permanent adversaries. Whether he would recognize it as such remained to be seen, but I had done what I could to honor our shared past, even as I prepared to defend my future against his attempts to control it. The next day brought the final preparations for our cafe's soft opening, a private event for friends, neighbors, and local business owners that would serve as a dress rehearsal before we officially opened to the public. The renovation was complete, the espresso machine installed, the display cases ready for the pastries Devin and May had been baking since dawn. As I arranged fresh flowers on the counter, daisies, not roses, cheerful, not pretentious, I realized I was humming, a simple sign of contentment I couldn't remember experiencing in years. Whatever challenges lay ahead, this moment was mine, this achievement, this space, this new beginning. The bell above the door chimed, and I turned, expecting Ellie or one of my employees. Instead, I found Patricia Lawson Hargrove standing in my cafe, looking as out of place as a peacock in a chicken coop with her designer clothes and carefully maintained appearance. "Martha," she said, glancing around with barely concealed judgment. "We need to talk." Patricia stood in the middle of my cafe, her designer handbag clutched in manicured fingers, looking simultaneously out of place and as if she owned it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence broken only by the soft hiss of the espresso machine warming up for our soft opening. "This is quite quaint," she said finally, running a finger along the counter's edge as if checking for dust. Charming in a rustic way. "Thank you," I replied neutrally, continuing to arrange the daisies. "Though I doubt you came all this way to critique my decor. What can I do for you, Patricia?" She sighed, the sound practiced and theatrical. "Martha, I think we got off on the wrong foot. All this tension, it's not good for any of us, especially Daniel. He's caught in the middle, torn between his loyalty to you and his new relationship with Richard and me. So, Daniel seems quite clear about where his loyalties lie," I observed, as demonstrated by his threats to sabotage my business and petition for guardianship over me. Patricia's eyes widened, a flash of genuine surprise quickly masked. "Guardianship? I don't know anything about that. That sounds extreme." "Does it? More extreme than Richard using his influence to block my business loan? Or suggesting to my contractor that permits might mysteriously be delayed?" She waved a dismissive hand. "Richard can be overzealous in his protective instincts. But Martha, you have to understand, we're concerned. Starting a business at your age, risking your security—" "My age again," I interrupted, placing the final daisy in the arrangement with deliberate care. It's fascinating how that keeps coming up, as if turning 60 suddenly rendered me incapable of making my own decisions. Patricia had the grace to look momentarily abashed. "It's not about capability, it's about practicality. The restaurant industry is brutal even for young entrepreneurs with experience. It's a cafe, not a restaurant. And my experience includes 30 years of budgeting, staff management, and customer service, just in a different context. Yes, as a custodial supervisor." Her slight hesitation before my job title spoke volumes. "Martha, I'm trying to find common ground here. We all want what's best for Daniel. Do we? Because from where I stand, what's best for Daniel would be learning that he can't manipulate or intimidate people when they don't comply with his wishes. That actions have consequences. That treating others with disrespect eventually catches up with you." Patricia's carefully maintained facade of conciliation cracked slightly. "Is that what this is about? Punishing Daniel for a thoughtless birthday gift?" "This isn't about punishment," I said, moving to check the pastry display Devin had been arranging earlier. "It's about boundaries and respect. And it's about me finally pursuing my own dreams after decades of putting everyone else first." "Noble sentiments," Patricia said, her tone sharpening. "But we both know there's more to it. Daniel told us about the joint account you emptied before all this started. If this is about money, it's my money," I cut in. "Earned through years of working 2 and sometimes 3 jobs to give Daniel the life I thought he deserved. Money I'm now choosing to invest in myself for a change. And if the cafe fails, what then? You'll have nothing left for retirement." I met her gaze directly. "Then I'll have the satisfaction of having tried, of having lived according to my own choices, not others' expectations. That's worth something too, Patricia. Something I suspect you understand better than most. A flicker of something, recognition, respect?" Crossed her features before she composed herself again. "What do you mean by that? You made choices too, didn't you? Giving up Daniel, building a different life. I never judged you for those choices, even when they caused pain. I respected that they were yours to make." "That was different," she said quickly. "I was young, alone. Richard's family would never have accepted a child from a previous relationship. So you chose security and status over motherhood. I'm not condemning that choice. I'm simply pointing out that you understood the value of determining your own path, even when others might disapprove." Patricia's polished veneer seemed to thin slightly. It wasn't that simple. It never is, I agreed. Just as my situation isn't as simple as a woman having a crisis because her son gave her cleaning supplies for her birthday. This is about reclaiming myself after a lifetime of self-erasure. Surely you can understand that. For a moment, something like genuine communication passed between us. Two women who had made very different choices but perhaps understood each other better than either would readily admit. Then Patricia straightened, recovering her poise. Regardless of your motivations, the fact remains that Daniel is deeply concerned. As his mother, his birth mother, I can't ignore that. And as the woman who raised him, I can't ignore that his concern seems focused on controlling my finances rather than supporting my happiness. Patricia opened her designer handbag, removing an envelope with the elegant letterhead of a prestigious law firm. Martha, I didn't want it to come to this, but you've left us no choice. This is a formal notice of intent to petition for limited guardianship, citing concerns about financial decision-making capacity. We're not trying to control your personal life. Just protect your assets before this experiment depletes them entirely. I accepted the envelope without opening it, my hand steady despite the shock rippling through me. They had actually done it, escalated to legal action to stop me from using my own money as I chose. I've received similar letters before, I said quietly. When the hospital wanted to terminate older employees to avoid pension obligations. When the landlord tried to force me out of my apartment to convert it to luxury condos. Do you know what those experiences taught me, Patricia? She didn't respond, but I continued anyway. They taught me that people with power expect those without it to surrender at the first sign of a fight. They count on fear, on limited resources, on the crushing weight of an unfair system. But occasionally they miscalculate. They underestimate what someone with nothing left to lose is capable of fighting for. Patricia's expression hardened. This isn't some corporate entity, Martha. This is family. Is it? Because family supports each other's dreams. Family celebrates independence, not punishes it. Family respects boundaries. We're trying to help you. No, I countered. You're trying to control me. And I need to make something very clear. I will fight this petition with everything I have. I will make public every manipulative tactic, every threat, every attempt to bully me into submission. I will ensure that everyone in Lakeside knows exactly what kind of family you and Daniel and Richard truly are. Patricia blanched slightly. You wouldn't. Think of what that would do to Daniel's reputation, his standing in the community. I'm thinking of what you're trying to do to my autonomy, my dignity, my right to make my own choices. If Daniel's reputation matters more to him than my freedom, then perhaps it's time for both of us to live with the consequences of our priorities. The bell above the door chimed again as Ellie entered, carrying a box of fresh linens for the tables. Shipa stopped short at the sight of Patricia. Well, she said, setting down the box with deliberate care. Looks like we have an unexpected visitor. Patricia glanced between us, clearly recalibrating her approach. I was just leaving. Martha and I have said what needed to be said. Have we? I asked. Because I have one more thing to add. The soft opening for my cafe is tonight at 7. You, Daniel, Vanessa, and Richard are welcome to attend. As guests, not adversaries. See what I'm building before you try to tear it down. That's my final offer of reconciliation. Patricia hesitated, visibly torn between maintaining the confrontation and retreating strategically. Finally, she nodded stiffly. I'll convey your invitation. But Martha, this legal matter won't simply disappear because you serve good coffee. After she left, Ellie turned to me with raised eyebrows. That woman has all the warmth of an icicle in February. What did she want? I handed her the envelope. To deliver this. They're filing for limited guardianship over my finances. Ellie's expression darkened as she read the document. Those manipulative, controlling... She broke off, taking a deep breath. What are you going to do? I moved behind the counter, adjusting the espresso cups with hands that finally allowed themselves to tremble slightly now that Patricia was gone. First, I'm going to call Michael. Then, I'm going to finish preparing for our soft opening. And then, if they actually show up tonight, I'm going to serve them the best damn coffee and pastries they've ever had, while making it abundantly clear that I am fully competent, completely in control, and absolutely determined to proceed with my plans regardless of their interference. Ellie smiled slowly. Martha Collins, I do believe adversity has revealed your inner warrior. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of final preparations. Michael Rodriguez called back promptly after receiving my message about the guardianship petition. Their legal standing is thin, he assured me. Your recent medical evaluation clearly establishes your competence, and their claims of financial irresponsibility are undermined by the fact that you secured a legitimate business loan through proper channels. However, these cases can become messy and prolonged if the petitioners are determined. Which they are, I said grimly. Then we fight back just as determinedly, Michael replied. I've drafted a counter-motion to dismiss their petition with prejudice, and I'm preparing affidavits from your doctor, your loan officer, and several character witnesses to establish your clear capacity. But Martha, be prepared. They may try other tactics outside the legal system. They already have. I told him about Patricia's visit and my invitation to the soft opening. Was that a mistake? Not necessarily, he said thoughtfully. Sometimes the most effective response to underhanded tactics is radical transparency. Let them see exactly what they're fighting against. Not a woman having a breakdown, but a competent business owner pursuing a legitimate dream. By 6:30 that evening, the cafe was transformed. Soft lighting cast a warm glow over the rustic wooden tables, each adorned with a small vase of daisies. The aroma of fresh pastries mingled with the rich scent of brewing coffee. Devon had created artful chalkboard menus, while Rachel arranged the display case with an eye for both aesthetics and practicality. May, whose previous career as a high school English teacher had given her a flair for the literary, had organized the bookshelves by theme, rather than strict alphabetical order, creating inviting nooks of shared interests. I stood in the center of it all, both terrified and exhilarated. This was my vision brought to life. The Second Chance Café, a name that felt increasingly meaningful with each passing day. Our first guests began arriving at 7 sharp, neighbors, former hospital colleagues, local business owners curious about the newest addition to Main Street. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with genuine exclamations of delight at the atmosphere, the coffee quality, and especially the baked goods. Martha, these scones are divine, Mrs. Abernathy from the bookshop next door declared. I'll be sending customers your way after they browse my shelves. The coffee is perfect, agreed Mr. Patel, who owned the pharmacy down the street. Strong enough for substance but not bitter. You have a gift. Each compliment, each expression of support, fortified my resolve. This wasn't a crisis or a rebellion. It was a genuine achievement, a business with real potential, a dream deserving of respect. At 7:45, the door chimed again. Daniel entered first, his expression guarded, followed by Vanessa, whose critical gaze swept over the space with barely concealed disdain. Behind them came Patricia and Richard, both looking uncomfortable and out of place despite, or perhaps, because of their expensive attire. The cafe's friendly buzz dimmed slightly as regular guests recognized Daniel and sensed the tension. I took a deep breath, remembering Michael's advice about radical transparency, and approached them with a professional smile. Welcome to the Second Chance Cafe, I said, my voice steady. Thank you for coming. Daniel looked momentarily disconcerted by my calm demeanor. Mom, it looks different than I expected. What were you expecting? He shrugged, clearly wrong-footed. I don't know. something less professional, I guess. That's quite a compliment coming from you, I replied, gesturing toward an empty table near the window. Would you like to sit? Devin can bring you our tasting menu, a selection of our signature items. Richard glanced around with the calculating eye of a businessman assessing competition. You've put considerable investment into this place. Yes, I agreed. Both financial and emotional. It's worth it. Vanessa fingered the tablecloth, simple cotton but high quality and carefully ironed. It's very homey. I suppose that appeals to a certain demographic. The demographic that appreciates authenticity and connection, yes, I replied, refusing to be baited into defensiveness. We're not trying to be exclusive or pretentious, just welcoming and genuine. Patricia remained silent, watching our exchange with unreadable eyes. Finally, she spoke. You seem different, Martha. I am different, I acknowledged. I'm becoming the person I set aside 35 years ago when I focused exclusively on being Daniel's mother. Daniel flinched slightly at that, but before he could respond, Devin arrived with a tray of coffee and pastry samples. Our house blend, a caramel latte and an herbal tea, he explained, setting them down with professional precision. And, to accompany them, cranberry orange scones, classic butter croissants, and Martha's signature cinnamon rolls, a recipe she perfected over 30 years of baking for hospital staff gatherings. Devin's pointed addition of that detail wasn't lost on anyone at the table. He gave me a supportive nod before returning to the counter, where Ellie, Rachel, and May were all watching the interaction with varying degrees of protectiveness. Please, enjoy, I said, stepping back slightly. I have other guests to attend to, but I'll check back with you shortly. As I moved among the other tables, greeting guests and accepting their congratulations, I remained acutely aware of Daniel's table. They spoke in low voices, occasionally glancing my way, sampling the offerings with varying degrees of reluctance that gradually gave way to apparent enjoyment. Even Vanessa, after a tentative bite of croissant, took a second, larger piece. After about 20 minutes, I returned to their table. How are you finding everything? To my surprise, it was Patricia who spoke first. The tea is exceptional. And these scones. Did you make them yourself? The base recipe is mine, I explained. But Devin, our pastry chef, has refined it. He's studying culinary arts at the community college and has a real talent. And the young woman at the counter? Richard asked, his tone uncharacteristically non-confrontational. Rachel, a single mother of two who previously worked in food service at the hospital. She's my assistant manager. Daniel looked troubled. You've created jobs, real ones, with people who depend on them. Yes, I said simply. That was part of the plan from the beginning. Not just to pursue my own dream, but to create opportunities for others who needed them. A complicated emotion crossed Daniel's face. Something like confusion mixed with reluctant respect. I didn't realize. You didn't ask, I pointed out gently. You assumed this was a whim, a reaction, a crisis. You never considered it might be a carefully planned business with legitimate goals and the potential for success. Vanessa sipped her latte, her expression thoughtful. It's good coffee, she admitted. Really good, actually. Thank you, I said. We source our beans from a local roaster, a woman-owned business that emphasizes fair trade and sustainable farming practices. Richard set down his cup, his businessman's assessment apparently complete. You've done your homework. Martha, the location is prime, the concept is clear, and you've identified a market niche. The execution appears professional. If you maintain this standard, you have a reasonable chance of success. Coming from Richard, this was tantamount to enthusiastic approval. I nodded my acknowledgement. I appreciate that assessment. An awkward silence fell, the preliminary pleasantries exhausted, the underlying conflict still unresolved. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice low enough that nearby tables couldn't overhear. "Mom, about the legal notice Patricia delivered. We should talk about that." "Yes," I agreed. "We should, but not here, not tonight. This evening is about celebrating the cafe's opening, not rehashing our disagreements. But the petition will be responded to through my attorney," I finished firmly. "Tonight, I'd prefer to focus on more positive interactions if possible." Patricia studied me with new intensity. "You're really going to fight us on this, aren't you? All the way?" "Every step," I confirmed. "But it doesn't have to be a fight. You could choose to respect my decisions instead of trying to control them." Richard leaned forward, his businessman's pragmatism reasserting itself. "Martha, let's be practical. Opening night impressions aside, the statistics for new business survival are daunting. When, this venture struggles, what's your fallback plan? That's our primary concern." "Is it?" I asked. Or is your primary concern that I'm using my money as I see fit, rather than conserving it for Daniel's future benefit?" Daniel flushed. "That's not fair. Isn't it? You accessed our joint savings for luxury purchases. You expected me to buy you a larger house. You assumed I would eventually move in with you to provide free childcare and housekeeping. Every plan you've made involves my resources serving your needs." "We were trying to help you," Vanessa insisted, though her convictions seemed to have diminished in the face of the cafe's evident quality. "No," I corrected gently. "You were trying to help yourselves to what's mine. My money, my time, my labor. You never once asked what would help me." As the words left my mouth, a commotion at the front door drew everyone's attention. Jay, my contractor, entered with an urgent expression, followed by two men in official-looking uniforms. "Martha," Jay called, his voice strained. "These gentlemen are from the fire marshal's office. They say there's been a complaint about code violations." The cafe fell silent as all eyes turned to the unfolding scene. I felt rather than saw Daniel and Richard exchange glances, confirmation that this surprise inspection was their doing. With deliberate calm, I approached the officials. "Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Martha Collins, the owner. How can I help you?" The older of the two, a stern-faced man with salt and pepper hair, consulted a clipboard. "Mrs. Collins, we've received an anonymous complaint about potential fire code violations, specifically overcrowding and blocked emergency exits. We need to conduct an immediate inspection." I nodded, maintaining my composure despite the anger building within me. "Of course. You're welcome to inspect anything you need to. All our permits are current, and we've been meticulous about compliance." Rachel appeared at my side, a folder in hand. "Here's our occupancy certificate and the fire safety inspection that was completed last week," she said, her voice professionally neutral, though her eyes flashed with indignation. "You'll find everything in order." The younger inspector reviewed the documents while his colleague walked the space, checking exits and extinguishers. After several tense minutes, they conferred briefly before approaching me again. "Mrs. Collins, everything appears to be in compliance," the older man said, sounding almost disappointed. "Your occupancy limit is clearly posted, your exits are properly marked and accessible, and your fire suppression systems are up to code. I'm not sure what prompted the complaint, but there's no violation to cite." "Thank you for your thoroughness," I said sincerely. "Safety is our top priority." As the inspectors left, the cafe's normal buzz of conversation gradually resumed. I turned back to Daniel's table, where all four sat in varying states of discomfort. "An anonymous complaint," I observed, my voice level but cold. "How interesting." Richard cleared his throat. "A standard precaution with any new business. Better to identify problems early." "Indeed," I agreed. Though typically one might mention concerns directly to the owner before involving authorities. Unless, of course, the goal wasn't safety, but disruption. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom, I don't know anything about— Please don't lie. To me, Daniel, I interrupted quietly. Not here, not now, not in the middle of what should be one of the proudest moments of my life. Have at least that much respect for me. The rawness in my voice seemed to penetrate his defenses. He looked up, finally meeting my gaze with a mixture of shame and defiance. We were concerned. After seeing the space during renovations, it seemed questionable. Yet you didn't voice these concerns then, I noted. You waited until our opening night, when you could cause maximum embarrassment and disruption. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her seat. It wasn't like that. We just wanted— I know exactly what you wanted, I cut in, my patience finally exhausted. You wanted to assert control, to demonstrate that you have the power to interfere with my business, my dreams, my independence anytime you choose, to remind me that my choices are subject to your approval. I looked at each of them in turn. Daniel, Vanessa, Patricia, Richard, these people who had appointed themselves the arbiters of my worth and capabilities. But here's what you've actually demonstrated tonight: that you're willing to use underhanded tactics to undermine someone you claim to care about, that your concern for my welfare extends only as far as it aligns with your interests, that you value obedience over happiness, control over respect. Patricia had the grace to look discomfited. Martha, perhaps we've been overzealous in our concerns. Overzealous? I repeated. You delivered a legal petition to declare me incompetent. You attempted to block my business loan. You tried to intimidate my contractor. And now you've called in a false complaint to the fire marshal on my opening night. That's not overzealousness. That's systematic harassment. Daniel stood abruptly. This isn't the place for this conversation. No, I agreed. It isn't. But you've made it the place through your actions. Just as you've made my birthday, my bank appointments, and my business meetings places for confrontation. You've left me no private space to maintain my dignity, so now we're having this discussion exactly where you've forced it to occur. By now, the other patrons were making little pretense of not listening, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright support for my position. Ellie had moved closer, a silent presence of solidarity at my back. Richard, ever the pragmatist, recognized the public relations disaster unfolding. Perhaps we should continue this privately, another time, he suggested, rising from his seat. I agree, I said. And until then, I'd like you to leave. All of you. This is my business, my space, my achievement, and I won't have it tainted by people who've actively tried to prevent its existence. Daniel's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You're throwing us out, your own family? I'm asking you to leave my place of business after you attempted to sabotage it, I corrected. How you frame that to yourselves is your choice. For a moment, I thought Daniel might argue further, might escalate the confrontation beyond repair. Instead, something in his expression shifted, a flicker of recognition, perhaps, of the boundaries he had repeatedly violated. Fine, he said finally. We'll go. But this isn't over, Mom. No, I agreed. It isn't. But how it continues is up to you now. You can persist with these tactics and force me to respond accordingly, or you can step back, reassess, and consider whether controlling my choices is worth destroying our relationship permanently. Vanessa and Patricia were already moving toward the door, their social instincts for avoiding public scenes overriding any desire to continue the confrontation. Richard paused, businessman to businesswoman, and offered a stiff nod that contained a reluctant trace of respect. Daniel was the last to leave, hesitating at the door. The cafe? It is nice, Mom. Better than I expected. I just wish you had. Consulted you first? I finished for him. Asked permission? Deferred to your judgment? Those days are over, Daniel. I'll always love you as my son, but I no longer require your approval to make my own choices. After they left, a spontaneous round of applause broke out among the remaining guests, my neighbors, colleagues, and new customers who had witnessed the entire scene. "To Martha," called Mrs. Abernathy, raising her coffee cup in a toast. "And to second chances." Others joined the toast, their faces alight with genuine support and admiration. In that moment, standing in the cafe I had created despite every obstacle, surrounded by people who valued my vision and respected my autonomy, I felt something I had almost forgotten: pride. Not pride in someone else's achievements, but in my own. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, laughter, and genuine connections. When the last guest had departed and we began closing procedures, my staff gathered around me at the counter. "So," Devin said, breaking the silence, "that was intense." "I'm sorry you all had to witness that," I began, but Rachel shook her head firmly. "Don't apologize," she insisted. "What we witnessed was someone finally standing up for themselves after years of being taken for granted. It was actually pretty inspiring." May nodded her agreement. "In my 30 years of teaching, I saw too many women surrender their dreams to support everyone else's. Watching you reclaim yours and defend it so eloquently was a privilege." Ellie, who had known me longest and understood best what tonight had cost emotionally, simply squeezed my hand. "Proud of you, Martha. Always have been, but never more than tonight." As we finished cleaning and turned out the lights, I stood, for a moment in the darkened cafe, absorbing the reality of what had transpired. I had confronted not just Daniel and his allies, but my own lifelong pattern of self-sacrifice and accommodation. I had drawn boundaries and defended them, even at the cost of painful conflict. I had claimed my right to self-determination, regardless of others' judgment. The confrontation had been messy, public, and far from resolved. Daniel and the others might escalate further, might proceed with their guardianship petition, might devise new ways to reassert control. But something fundamental had shifted tonight. In them, in me, in the dynamics between us. For the first time in decades, I had demonstrated not just to them but to myself that my dreams mattered, my autonomy mattered, my right to determine my own path mattered. Whatever came next, legal battles, family estrangement, hard-earned success, or instructive failure, I would face it as a woman who had reclaimed her voice, her vision, and her value beyond the roles others had assigned her. As I locked the door of the Second Chance Cafe behind me, I realized that was exactly what I had given myself: a second chance. Not just at a business, but at living deliberately, defining my own worth, and writing the next chapter of my life according to my own dreams. The night air was cool on my face as I walked toward Ellie's waiting car, my steps lighter than they had been in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I had stood my ground and discovered that beneath decades of accommodation and self-denial, there existed a woman of surprising strength, clarity, and determination. She had been there all along, waiting for permission to emerge. And finally, I had given it. The morning after the soft opening, I arrived at the Second Chance Cafe an hour earlier than scheduled. Dawn was just breaking over Lakeside, painting Main Street in gentle shades of pink and gold. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, savoring the quiet of the empty space. The lingering scent of coffee and pastries, the polished wooden tables awaiting their first customers of the day, the bookshelves lined with carefully selected volumes. My cafe, my dream, my second chance. The previous night's confrontation with Daniel, Vanessa, Patricia, and Richard had left me emotionally drained, but also strangely energized. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had stood my ground without apology or compromise, defending not someone else's interests, but my own. As I began preparing for the day, grinding fresh coffee beans, checking inventory, reviewing the day's special offerings, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael Rodriguez. "Interesting development. The Hargroves' attorney called this morning, requesting a meeting. No new court filings yet. How do you want to proceed? I considered his message while measuring coffee grounds with practiced precision. The request for a meeting rather than immediate legal escalation suggested a potential shift in strategy. Whether that represented genuine reconsideration or merely a tactical adjustment remained to be seen. Let's meet, I texted back. But on neutral ground, not their territory or ours. And I want you present for every word. Michael suggested a conference room at the public library, a location that was both neutral and appropriately public. After confirming with Ellie that she could cover the cafe during my absence, I agreed to meet the Hargroves and their attorney there at 3 o'clock. The cafe's official opening that morning exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. Word had spread about both our offerings and the previous night's drama, drawing a steady stream of curious and supportive customers. By noon, we had sold out of May's signature lavender shortbread and Devon's cinnamon rolls, necessitating an emergency baking session during what should have been the midday lull. "This is crazy," Rachel said during a rare quiet moment, surveying the cafe with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. "I've worked food service for 8 years, and I've never seen a first day this busy." Devon nodded as he wiped down the espresso machine. "It's not just curiosity either. People are coming back for seconds, asking about tomorrow's menu. We're actually good." "We are," I agreed, feeling a surge of pride not just in my own vision, but in this team we had assembled. And we're going to get better. At 2:30, I changed from my flour-dusted apron into the simple but elegant teal dress I had worn for the soft opening, a deliberate choice to present the same confident image from the night before. Ellie arrived to take over operations, giving me a quick hug before shooing me toward the door. "Go show those vultures what Martha Collins is made of," she said. "We've got things covered here." The Lakeside Public Library was a stately brick building at the edge of town, its large windows overlooking the actual lake for which our community was named. The conference room Michael had reserved faced the water, providing a calming backdrop for what promised to be a tense conversation. Michael was waiting outside when I arrived, his professional demeanor softened by genuine concern. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected," I admitted. "The cafe opened to a full house, and we've been busy all day. It helps to have concrete evidence that my irrational financial decision might actually be sound business." He smiled. "Success is the best revenge." But Martha, a word of caution. The Hargroves didn't specify what they want to discuss. They may be coming to negotiate, but they could also be setting up for a more aggressive strategy. "Don't let your guard down." "I won't," I promised. "Not again." We entered the conference room to find it already occupied. Richard and Patricia sat on one side of the large oval table, with a sleek, silver-haired woman in an expensive suit. Beside them, their attorney, presumably. To my surprise, Daniel was also present, sitting slightly apart from the others, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Collins," the attorney began, rising to offer her hand. "I'm Evelyn Marsh, representing the Hargrove family. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." "Of course," I replied, shaking her hand briefly before taking a seat across from them. "This is my attorney, Michael Rodriguez." Michael nodded professionally as he arranged his materials on the table. "I understand you requested this meeting, Ms. Marsh. What would you like to discuss?" Evelyn glanced at Richard, who gave a slight nod. "We've been reviewing the situation and believe there may be room for compromise that serves everyone's interests." "I'm listening," I said cautiously. "First," she continued, "my clients are prepared to withdraw the guardianship petition, provided certain conditions are met." Michael raised an eyebrow. "What conditions?" Richard leaned forward, adopting the tone of a reasonable businessman, making a generous offer. "Martha, we recognize that the cafe appears to be off to a promising start. While we still have concerns about its long-term viability, we're willing to step back, if you agree to certain financial safeguards. What kind of safeguards? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. A family trust, Patricia interjected, with your assets, including the cafe, placed in a structure that protects them from potential business failure. You would maintain operational control of the cafe, but major financial decisions would require approval from co-trustees, yourself, and either Daniel or a neutral third party. I glanced at Daniel, who had remained silent, his gaze fixed on the table between us. And you support this proposal? He looked up finally, his expression conflicted. I think it's reasonable. You get to keep your cafe, but with a safety net. It's a compromise, Mom. Michael's response was immediate and firm. This isn't a compromise. It's the same attempt at financial control, just repackaged. My client is a fully competent adult who has demonstrated sound business judgment. She doesn't need oversight or approval for her decisions. With all due respect, Evelyn countered. Mrs. Collins has made a significant high-risk investment at an age when financial recovery from failure would be difficult, if not impossible. The proposed trust simply provides protection. From my own judgment, I finished for her. Let's be clear about what you're suggesting. You want me to voluntarily surrender my financial autonomy, the very thing you tried to take through the guardianship petition, in exchange for being allowed to operate my own business with supervision. Richard shifted uncomfortably. When you phrase it that way, it sounds more controlling than intended. How else should it be phrased? I asked. You're still claiming the right to approve or disapprove my financial decisions. The only difference is you're asking me to consent to the arrangement rather than forcing it through the courts. Patricia leaned forward, her carefully maintained composure showing signs of strain. Martha, why are you being so difficult about this? We're trying to find middle ground. There is no middle ground on autonomy, I replied. Either I have the right to make my own decisions, good or bad, successful or not, or I don't. What you're offering isn't compromise, it's conditional freedom. Evelyn Marsh intervened, her professional mask firmly in place. Perhaps we should consider alternative approaches. Mrs. Collins, what would you be willing to accept as a resolution? I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts before responding. Complete withdrawal of the guardianship petition. Written acknowledgement that I am fully competent to manage my own affairs. A formal agreement that neither Daniel nor the Hargroves will interfere with my business or financial decisions moving forward. And in return? Richard asked, his businessman's instinct for negotiation engaged. In return, I won't pursue legal action for the harassment, attempted sabotage, and defamation I've experienced at your hands over the past weeks. A tense silence followed my words, broken finally by Daniel. Mom, that's not fair. We were concerned. About you. Were you? I turned to face him directly. Were you concerned when you accessed our joint savings for luxury purchases without consulting me? Were you concerned when you hid your relationship with Patricia from me for over a year? Were you concerned when you suggested I should live in your home office to provide free housekeeping and childcare? He flushed. That's not how it was. Then how was it, Daniel? Because from where I stand, your concern manifested only when I started making decisions you couldn't control or benefit from. Michael touched my arm lightly, a gentle reminder to stay focused on the legal resolution rather than relitigating emotional grievances. I nodded slightly, acknowledging his counsel. Here's my offer, I continued more calmly. Withdraw the petition. Sign a non-interference agreement. Acknowledge my competence in writing. In return, I won't pursue further legal action, and I'll consider rebuilding our relationship over time, provided it's based on mutual respect rather than control. Evelyn conferred briefly with the Hargroves in hushed tones before responding. We can agree to withdraw the petition. The acknowledgement of competence is also acceptable. However, The non-interference agreement seems unnecessarily adversarial. Families should be able to offer advice and support without formal restrictions. Advice and support are welcome, I clarified. Calling false complaints to regulatory authorities attempting to block business loans and threatening my employees are not. The agreement would define those boundaries explicitly. Another consultation followed, with Daniel participating more actively this time. Finally, Evelyn turned back to us. We can accept those terms, with the provision that the agreement specifically distinguishes between inappropriate interference and normal family concern. Michael and I exchanged glances. That's workable, he confirmed. We'll draft the language. For your review. As the attorneys discussed procedural details, I found myself studying Daniel. This son I had raised, loved, sacrificed for. Somewhere along the way, I had failed to teach him the difference between love and possession, between concern and control. Or perhaps I had taught that lesson too well through my own example of endless accommodation and self-denial. When the II meeting concluded, the attorneys remained to finalize details while the rest of us prepared to leave. Richard and Patricia exited first, their manner cordial but distant, the negotiation having reinforced the transactional nature of our connection. Daniel lingered, clearly wanting a private word. After a moment's hesitation, I nodded to Michael that it was okay, and we stepped out into the library's main hall. Mom, Daniel began, his voice lower, less certain than I was accustomed to hearing. I don't know how we got here. Don't you? I asked gently. You started seeing me as a resource, rather than a person, someone whose purpose was to serve. Your needs, whose value was measured by utility to your plans. He shook his head. That's not true. I've always loved you. I believe you have, I acknowledged. But Daniel, love isn't just feeling. It's action. It's respect. It's recognizing another person's right to self-determination, even when their choices don't benefit you. He was quiet for a long moment, processing my words. The cafe. It really does seem like it's going well. It is. And even if it weren't, even if it struggled or ultimately failed, it would still be my right to try, to take that risk, to learn from whatever outcome emerged. I just wanted to protect you, he insisted, though with less conviction than before. No, Daniel. You wanted to protect access to what you thought was rightfully yours, my money, my time, my labor. When I redirected those resources toward my own dreams, you didn't see it as independence. You saw it as theft. His expression revealed the accuracy of my assessment, though he struggled to accept it. What happens now? With us? I considered the question carefully. That depends on you. I'm building a new life, one centered on my choices, my vision, my worth beyond motherhood. There's room in that life for you, but only if you can see me as a complete person, not just your mother. And if I can't? He asked, a hint of his old defiance returning. Then we'll maintain whatever distance is necessary for me to protect my boundaries, I replied honestly. I love you, Daniel. I always will. But I finally love myself enough not to surrender my autonomy to keep peace. He nodded slowly, absorbing the finality in my tone. I should get back to Vanessa. She's not handling this well. I imagine not, I said, thinking of the dynamic between them, the shared expectation of my continued service, the assumption of access to my resources. Give her my regards. As he turned to leave, I called after him softly. Daniel? The invitation still stands. You're welcome at the cafe anytime. As a customer, a family member, but not as an overseer or judge. He acknowledged this with a slight nod before walking away, his posture suggesting a man confronting uncomfortable truths about himself for perhaps the first time. I returned to the cafe to find it still bustling with late-afternoon customers. Ellie caught my eye from behind the counter, raising an eyebrow in silent question. I gave her a small thumbs up, promising details later, and rolled up my sleeves to help with the closing shift. By 7 o'clock, we had served our last customer, completed the day's accounting, and begun preparations for tomorrow's opening. The till showed receipts nearly double our projected first-day sales, and our reservation book was already filling for weekend brunch service. "We did it," Rachel said as we gathered for an impromptu celebration with leftover pastries and coffee. "First official day in the books, and we crushed it." Devin raised his mug in a toast. "To Martha, who believed in this place, and in us, when everyone said it couldn't work. To all of us," I corrected, including everyone in my gesture. "The Second Chance Cafe isn't just my dream anymore, it's ours collectively." After the others left, Ellie remained, helping me with final lockup procedures. "So, what happened at the meeting?" As I recounted the negotiation and my conversation with Daniel, she listened with the deep understanding of someone who had witnessed my entire journey, from codependent mother to autonomous woman, from supporting actor in others' stories to protagonist in my own. "Do you think they'll honor the agreement?" she asked when I finished. "I think they'll honor the letter of it," I replied thoughtfully. "The spirit may take longer, especially for Daniel. He spent 35 years seeing me primarily as a source of support and service. That perspective won't change overnight." "And if it doesn't change at all?" I considered the possibility that had once seemed unthinkable, a permanent distancing from the son I had centered my entire existence around. "Then I'll find ways to make peace with that too. My worth isn't determined by his validation anymore." 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, I stood behind the counter of the Second Chance Cafe, surveying what my dream had become. The initial buzz of curiosity had evolved into steady custom. A loyal clientele who came not just for Devin's pastries or our carefully sourced coffee, but for the sense of community the cafe had fostered. The bookshelves had expanded, with informal book clubs forming around shared reading interests. The back room, initially intended for storage, had been converted into a small event space where local artists displayed their work and community groups held meetings. Rachel had launched a Pay It Forward program, allowing customers to pre-purchase coffee or meals for those who couldn't afford them. Financially, we were exceeding projections, not wildly profitable yet, but steadily growing, reinvesting in the business, creating additional part-time positions, and establishing the cafe as a lakeside fixture rather than a fleeting novelty. My relationship with Daniel had entered an uneasy rebuilding phase. After 2 months of minimal contact, he had begun stopping by the cafe occasionally, first alone, later sometimes with Vanessa. Our interactions remained careful, the weight of unresolved emotions and adjusting expectations creating a tentative dance of redefinition. Patricia and Richard had maintained polite distance, honoring the letter of our agreement while showing little interest in deeper reconciliation. That was fine with me. They had been Daniel's choice, not mine, and I had no illusion that genuine connection would magically emerge from our forced association. As for me, I had discovered unexpected aspects of myself in this new chapter, a talent for business I hadn't known I possessed, a capacity for leadership that had always been there but never fully expressed, and perhaps most surprisingly, a gift for mentorship that had transformed my role from mother of one to guide for many. The bell above the door chimed, interrupting my reflections. I looked up to see a woman in her 40s enter hesitantly, her expression suggesting the particular blend of exhaustion and determination I had come to recognize in those at personal crossroads. "Welcome to the Second Chance Cafe," I greeted her warmly. "What can I get for you today?" She approached the counter, studying the menu with distracted attention. "Just coffee, I think. Regular, black." As I prepared her order, she glanced around the cafe, her gaze lingering on the framed article from the local newspaper, a feature about my journey from hospital custodian to business owner at 60. "Is that you?" she asked when I returned, with her coffee. "In the article?" "It is," I confirmed, though they made me sound far more impressive than I feel most days. She smiled faintly. It's still impressive. To start over at that age. To build something new when most people are winding down. Something in her tone, a wistfulness, a questioning, prompted me to respond more personally than I might have with a typical customer. It's never too late, you know, for a second chance. Her eyes met mine, startled by the direct address of what she hadn't quite articulated. Even when you've spent your whole life being what everyone else needed. When you don't even know who you are anymore? Especially then, I said gently. That's why I named this place what I did, because I needed to remind myself daily that reinvention is always possible. That the time we have left, whether it's decades or days, is still ours to shape. She nodded slowly, absorbing my words. I'm Andrea, she said finally. I've been a stay-at-home mom for 20 years. My youngest just left for college and my husband. She trailed off, the rest of the story evident in her expression. Martha, I replied, extending my hand. Former janitor, current cafe owner, perpetual work in progress. Her smile was more genuine this time. Do you have time to talk? I mean, not now if you're busy, but sometime? I'd like to hear more about how you found yourself again. I gestured toward the quiet corner with the most comfortable chairs, what regulars had taken to calling the wisdom nook for the conversations that tended to unfold there. I have time now, if you do. Rachel can cover the counter for a bit. As we settled into the chairs with our coffees, I recognized a reflection of my former self in Andrea's uncertainty. The woman who had defined her worth through service to others, who had forgotten how to dream for herself, who stood hesitating at the threshold of self-reclamation. It started with a birthday gift, I began, sharing my story not as a prescription, but as permission. Authorization for another woman to imagine a different future than the one prescribed by habit and expectation. My son gave me cleaning supplies, while his wife received diamonds, and something in me finally said, enough. Andrea listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking questions, her initial hesitation gradually yielding to cautious hope. By the time we finished our coffees, a subtle shift had occurred in her demeanor. A straightening of the shoulders, a clarity in the eyes, the first fragile emergence of possibility. I should go, she said eventually, gathering her purse. But, thank you, Martha. For the coffee, for the conversation, for the reminder that it's not too late to become who I might have been. It never is, I assured her. And when you figure out what your own second chance looks like, come tell me about it. We support each other here. After she left, I returned to the counter where Rachel was handling the midday rush with practiced efficiency. Making another convert? She teased, having witnessed similar conversations over the months. Just passing along what I've learned, I replied, that we're never too old to rewrite our stories. That value doesn't depend on usefulness to others. That second chances aren't just for the young. As the afternoon sun filtered through the cafe windows, casting warm light across tables where people connected, worked, dreamed, and simply existed on their own terms, I felt a deep contentment that had nothing to do with conventional success or others' approval. This space, physical and metaphorical, that I had created was more than a business. It was a testament to the power of self-reclamation, a sanctuary for redefinition, a reminder that transformation remains possible at every stage of life. Daniel would visit the following day, our weekly coffee meeting having become a tentative tradition in our evolving relationship. The conversation would still carry echoes of our past conflicts, but increasingly, it also contained moments of genuine connection as he gradually learned to see me as Martha, the person, not just Mom the provider. Vanessa had recently asked about possibly holding a small art exhibition in our event space, a surprising development that suggested her own journey of redefinition might be beginning as she explored interests beyond social status and material acquisition. As for the birthday that had catalyzed this transformation, cleaning supplies versus diamonds, utility versus value, it approached again, marking nearly a full year since the moment my patience had finally exhausted itself. This year would be different. This birthday would be celebrated on my terms, in my space, surrounded by people who saw and appreciated me for who I truly was. There would be no gifts of cleaning supplies, no reminders of servitude, no measurements of worth through usefulness. Instead, there would be recognition of a woman who had finally understood that her dreams deserved equal standing, that her happiness wasn't secondary, that her identity extended far beyond the roles assigned by others. The cleaning supplies that had once symbolized my limitation had inadvertently become the catalyst for my liberation. The son who had seen me only as support staff had begun the painful process of recognizing my full humanity. The life that had once been defined by others' needs had transformed into one shaped by my own vision and values. As I moved through my cafe, greeting customers, adjusting displays, embodying the confidence of a woman who had reclaimed herself, I silently thanked that tone-deaf birthday gift for the awakening it had prompted. Sometimes the most valuable presents aren't the ones wrapped in pretty paper, but the painful moments that finally force us to recognize our own worth. The Second Chance Cafe had become more than a business. It was a philosophy, a community, a testament to the power of believing that it's never too late to become the person you were meant to be before the world told you who you should be instead. And for a 61-year-old former janitor who had finally learned that lesson, that was the most precious gift of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these. Just click and check them out.